what is the line between I want to do a great thing and I want to adopt and I want to give a kid a home, and I'm doing it to make myself feel better and look like a good person? Okay. I have never been so excited to react to something. I am a transracial adoptee. If you're coming off this video, you don't know who I am. My name is Seneca. I was born in Uganda, adopted at like a couple weeks, if not like a month old, from Kampala, Uganda. But my parents and I, like it's just us. I have 4 other siblings. All of us lived in Africa for a while and then moved to the States when I was 12 officially, but even before that moved around a lot. And I just find it really hard to talk with people about transracial adoption because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand the depths of what you go through unless you're talking to somebody who can relate. So I'm so excited to get into talking about this with anybody who will listen. So I'm excited for us to kind of like go through this video and talk about the realness that is being a transracial adoptee. Also, I get nervous about saying the word transracial adoptee because I think that like in the context of trans, people know about like transgender. So people I think may even think like transracial is like, oh, you don't identify as a black person. No, I'm a black person. I just happen to be adopted by a race that is not my own. That's what transracial is in relation to adoption. So if some people are like confused about like what the heck is transracial, it just means that you're from a family who is not your own race.
Are more screwed up than biological kids. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm really curious about you two first.
Yeah.
I know so many biological kids that are screwed up. And they were raised in like a healthy, nuclear, cliche, white picket fence family. And I know several adopted kids that are so successful, that are doing great. I mean, shout out Simone Biles. She went to the Olympics and she was adopted.
Can I move? Like, she changed my mind a bit. Like,
Come on.
Can I?
I'm like, she has a point there. I can't.
No, I can strongly disagree with that.
Okay. This prompt, I think, is not really well written. The idea of, oh, adopted kids are more messed up than biological kids. You could be an adopted kid born with basically adopted into a very privileged, very wealthy family. And a lot of adopted kids are, because it takes a lot of money to adopt. Like adoption, you typically don't get adopted into a family that doesn't have a lot of privileges. Adoption at its core starts off because it's a traumatic event. A mother not being able to be with her child and having to give up their child, that's a form of trauma that is very valid. Biological children, yes, have their own trauma, like in their own right, can go through like circumstances that are very hard, and it doesn't negate their issues. Like there are some biological children that like struggle so much more than adopted kids. Like even in adoption itself, like there are some adopted stories that are much harder than others. I feel like my story is really not that difficult compared to people who, were born and raised in the foster care system. But at the basis of this prompt of like adopted kids have it harder than biological kids, at the core, you were born into a family that couldn't take care of you, and you now are having to adjust to a new environment. And that is potentially traumatic, and that is really difficult. I don't know about more or less, because it depends from situation to situation, but just on the basis of you're born into a circumstance that is less than ideal, that's more difficult than just simply being born into your own family, where you can see your own biology, where you can be kind of like set up to live in your own, I don't know. But it's also, circumstances are different for everybody. I, as an adopted kid, find that I've had a lot of privileges that a lot of other, like some other biological children who are black won't have. But at the same, like it's just very circumstantial. So I think this is like a bad prompt.
No, because like the thing is, she changed my mind on that because like as a foster kid, like somebody who went through all that, we are f***ed up. Like we go through so much, like through that whole process, seeing and feeling neglected from like the foster parents. but I don't let my past, where I grew up, like define who I am to make me screwed up.
Yeah, so I'm on strongly agree because I've been through a few therapeutic boarding schools, wilderness programs. One of them, I remember, it's a place where wealthy parents send their children, so it's privilege. And even with all that privilege, everybody there was messed up, just saying like they weren't stable, whether it was a drug addiction or just like bad temper or violence. Adoptees all carry this trauma. Maybe it has something to do with identity and not knowing a lot about our background. Well, some of us not knowing a lot about our background. I think like we don't even have a birthday. And me personally going through that and growing up in a colorblind environment, it's kind of like we were left to fend for ourselves. And I think any children that have to fend for themselves are gonna go through some messed up shit.
100%. That's just the root of it to me, is just that adoption in itself is traumatic. Like, and being born as a biological child could be traumatic depending on the circumstances that you're born into. But at the base of it, the whole act is a traumatic thing to go through. So, I don't know.
But yeah.
So, thank you for sharing, by the way. I look at this question through two lenses. The adopted community as a whole is 4 times more at risk of suicide than non-adopted counterparts. I think that adopted kids are more at risk for struggle, not because of us, but because of society and because of the dominant narrative of white saviorism that is all surrounding adoption. We all know this narrative, but the narrative for those that don't know is this notion of adoptees should feel lucky, adoptees must be grateful, and gratitude is related to this idea of repayment. The effect of that is that we as adoptees, as a whole community, feel like we're less worth than our non-adopted counterparts. It makes us feel like you should repay your life that you were given. You should repay the fortunes that were given to you.
Oh my God.
And for little kids,
Oh my God.
how can we repay something that's immeasurable? And it's not fair for us as little kids to have that weight, that burden on us while growing up. And because we have that weight, because we have that burden, that's what, so to speak, messes us up.
You're bringing back some stuff. I'm like,
Oh my, I don't want to speak for every single thing that happens in this video because this video is going to be like 50 minutes long. But I do just want to say, it is hard as a child to grow up adopted and to have to be able to explain very complex, confusing situations like in relation to your adoption to other kids who just don't get it. Like, it's something as an adult I am currently working through in therapy to fully understand myself. I had my first ever empathetic thought for my mother a couple months ago. And it just is really sad that I'm kind of going through this, with the exception of having like my adopted brother as well, alone. That is something that my parents can't relate to. That is something that my siblings who are biologically related to my parents couldn't relate to, and that's just difficult to deal with. So I just say, like, in relation to just simply being in a family, it is more difficult to feel accepted when you're not a biological child.
like, Jesus.
I chose to be on this side because I felt if I was on that side, it'd be denying my experience as an adoptee, the fear of abandonment that feels inherent to being an adoptee. Because of that, I have definitely been in relationships I shouldn't have been in, toxic ones, and relationships for way too long. What comes with that then is like feeling like you have to prove that you're worthy of love constantly because of the inner voids and wounds of being abandoned as a baby, or just abandoned in general.
Yeah.
Those wounds cut
Felt
deep.
that. Yeah.
I feel like all adoptees that I've ever met, 2 of my like closest friends are adopted. We're very clingy. Like, we very much so have been through a lot of relationships and accepted like top, I was gonna say top tier, but like low tier, the lowest tier level of like love that anybody should ever accept, because we're like constantly looking for that acceptance within the abandonment that was like the beginning.
Hi, my name is Matea. I am adopted from China in the 90s during the one-child policy. So one thing I'm super grateful about with my parents is they really valued making sure that my brother and I experienced our heritage. Every summer, we would go to this camp that specifically focused on our Chinese heritage and taught us different aspects of it. So like language, calligraphy, dance, martial arts. And so that was a really special and I think important experience to have as a transracial adoptee.
Hi, my name is Eli. I'm 23 years old and I was adopted from South Korea at 9 months old. I have 4 adopted siblings, also from Korea, and I grew up in Denver, Colorado.
You know what, I will say that too. I feel like there is a difference between, you can just kind of tell when you're speaking to adoptees, like who comes from a family of all adoptees versus who comes from a family of, you're like one of the only ones who's adopted. You know, like if you have biological siblings, like your experience is very different. Yeah, I'm even thinking about that in terms of my friends. Like, I feel like the amount of topics you're willing to go into is very different based off that.
So not a lot of diversity there. And I'm actually about to go look for my birth parents this fall.
Hello, good humans. We hope you're enjoying this very special episode of Spectrum.
Shoot, I skipped a prompt.
Transracial adoption should not be allowed. 3, 2, 1, go.
Transracial adoption should be allowed, but it just, you have to be such the most accommodating, educated person in order to do a good job. That's not controversial.
Theoretically, let's say we were on agree for one reason. Do you guys have any gripes against transracial adoption?
Well, yeah, like I guess like what I just said a little bit.
Savior complex.
Savior complex.
I mean, there are people in the world who I think view transracial adoption as this like, oh, I'm doing a cool thing. Like, I've met people who have said those specific things where they're like, I've always just wanted a black child, you know, but that's it. There's no like, why do you want a black child? Or, you know, or like, it was like a savior mentality almost. And I do think that it's really important as further we go to have that education and to not go in with it with a colorblind stance, because it does do a lot more harm, at least it did for me growing up, than, yeah, just opening up your kids to the culture that they came from.
Yeah, no, you really spoke to something. All my friends.
What is the line between I want to do a great thing and I want to adopt and I want to give a kid a home, and I'm doing it to make myself feel better and look like a good person? Where the heck? I have thought about that my whole entire life. No, that's a lie. I've thought about that from the time I was like enlightened and like really took a look into, I don't know, like even like ideas of like white saviorism, being a black adoptee, being, you know, having a Christian background. You know what? Especially coming from a Christian background is like, okay, a lot of Christians adopt and a lot of Christians love to say like they're so selfless, but a lot of Christians be out here fumbling adoptions, like really traumatizing their kids. Like, what the heck is the line between I want to do this good thing and this will make me a good person?
Friends that are black or Arabic, have all this culture that they grew up with, and they like years and years of like learning stuff, and that's what I missed out on. So for the future generations and people who are adopting right now, I think the biggest thing would be to stop being colorblind, because we're not helping the kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree that everybody deserves a set of parents, family. Everybody deserves to be loved and nurtured and cared for. However, the recent legislation that almost didn't pass, I guess, for ICWA, which is the Indigenous Child Welfare Act, being Native American and not adopted by Native Americans, I don't know anything. You know, there's so much about my life that just didn't make sense until I went out and learned it myself. So I feel like that small community of Native children need to stay with other Natives. It doesn't have to be the same tribe, but just keep them Native, because, you know, our population's declining.
I mean, I am sitting here where
Even that idea is so heartbreaking. Just the idea of Native Americans being pulled from their tribes when Native American the Native American population is already dwindling, and we know so little. I know so little about Native American culture from a non, like, whitewashed history perspective. I know so little, and it's so inaccessible, so I can't even imagine, like, as a Native American adoptee, how to even feel. That's crazy. I'm sad.
Where I am, but I do think it is a little bit of a privileged place to be standing, because I think the reality of adoption in the US and culture in the US is that it's very hard to be a person of color here in this country. You know, my parents were white. My parents being white will never understand what it's like to be a person of color in the US.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to connect with me in that way, which is kind of a big deal. Now, there are other things that they do really, really well, but the reality is living here is kind of tough for a person of color, and they can recognize that for me, but they can't know what my experience is.
Yeah. Oh shoot, I got an ad anyways. Okay, that's just that part. Like, your parents can recognize what you go through, and I think my parents are incredibly educated, incredibly empathetic, incredibly great advocates for me as a person, for Africans in general, but they will never relate to me. And that is like something I'm constantly searching for in other people, which is sometimes why I think I preferred a lot of my friends growing up, which is because it's like, we just can't relate on a lot of levels.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben. I was adopted from China at 11 months by my dads Bill and Sam, and I grew up in New York City.
Hi, my name is Nora. So a little bit about my adoption story. I was found in a dug hole in a park by a police officer when I was about, I think it was a week or two old. So a little bit about my adopted parents. They're both white French Canadians. My parents were infertile. They couldn't have their own children. But my mother always had a strong need to be a mother and to have a family. So I think, yeah, it's always been important. So it was children, or it had to be.
Okay, let's mix it up. Can each of you tell me some of the crazy stuff that people have said to you as a transracial adoptee?
Okay, who are your parents? Because my parents are white, so they never know where they are in the crowd.
Do you know your real parents though?
What country are you originally from?
Oh yeah, where are you from?
I used to get made fun of being adopted, so I would say my parents chose me. Yours just stuck with what they got.
You're so lucky. Congrats. Oh, that was a big one. People would literally be like, congratulations. For what?
Are your parents coming to the parent meeting conference? They never came. Or are they coming to your football game? They never came.
For me, it actually comes from other Asians. So the microaggressions, it's like, yeah, Eli's white, or hey, if we go to a potluck, you can bring them a meatloaf, right?
Reset.
Trauma throwing. Yeah. There should be trauma dump moment right there.
Yeah, but adoptees can laugh at that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, no. We always, the amount of dark humor we go through, like, I mean, come on, it's very common. Yeah. Hi, how's it going? My name is Prodigy. I'm actually 21 years old. I went through the adoption process a lot later than other people. Like, I went through the foster care system. Basically, how it all started for me was having a little bit of problems at the start with my own family, and it led to me being taken away from, from my own mother. So I'm Nicaraguense and I'm Honduran, and my adoptive parents, they're actually Salvadorian. And even though we are from the same branch in Central America, at the end of the day is that everybody has their different cultures. Like with Nicaragua and Honduras, like they were at war at some point, same with Nicaragua and El Salvador. And at first it was a little bit of trouble, but at the end of the day, like they're still my family. I can still go to their house and eat in the same table with them. But like I said, I'm a proud Hispanic.
I have used microaggressions.
Hold on. I'm not knocking his experience whatsoever because he still is a trans-ethnic adoptee, but I just think that's more trans-ethnic. Transracial to me is like you're a different straight-up race. And isn't race just more so black, white, Hispanic, like, versus transnational? I don't know. That just is interesting that they included that. But I do think it's still very important. And I think also I'm more used to the whole like white parents and then like person of color dynamic versus like anything else, which is so fascinating. sad, but you know.
Against my own race. Oof. 3, 2, 1, go.
I think when I was younger, there was definitely some jokes that I made, which I deeply regret, but trust me, I'm picking up the slack now. But I think it also the fact that I was growing up countryside in like a predominantly white place made it so that like I accepted a lot of things, little comments or little jokes that I would just let slide, or people using the N-word. And I think when I started learning more about Black culture, that's when I was like, okay, that's really not okay, and this is why. But I think that also comes with maturity and age.
So I'm on strongly agree because I hated being Asian growing up. I despised it, man. My dad would give me a buzz cut, I had glasses, and so every time I went out, we just kind of would get looks because there's 5 adopted kids. And man, I just remember making the crudest, most horrible jokes because it, in a weird way, validated me as like an Asian almost, because in some way I felt like this is what was expected of me, to make these jokes, to make these comments, to make everyone laugh and feel comfortable about my adoption. And what I realized is, dang, like first off, I'm starting to believe this stuff. Second off, I'm doing it in service of others. Like I'm making these jokes to make other people feel comfortable.
I do.
Yo, yikes. Oh, that really hurts. Oh my god, it like makes me uncomfortable because I know exactly what he's talking about. And if you are like even just any person of color in a predominantly white area, or if you're like any minority in a majority space, you do pick on yourself and you do pick on your own group, because in a way, like it's like getting ahead of the joke when you know it's going to be said. Like it's like getting ahead of like the racism or getting ahead of whatever people are throwing at you. But then you realize that you're like contributing to it, so it's just like uncomfortable, but you're just like, this is what all the other kids are doing, so I don't know. And then also I kind of feel like as a transracial adoptee with white parents, sometimes there comes like this almost like supremacy that you feel like almost rubs off on you as well, which is like wild, because it doesn't. Like it almost like when I remember being in 9th grade and I went to predominantly Hispanic, it was like 70% Hispanic, maybe 10% Black, and then the other random like mixed kids probably, but like and just like thinking that I was so above them, which makes me really sad and upset, because like I think that there is the idea that if your proximity to whiteness is really close and you're like very close to whiteness and you come from a white family, that means that you're like better and you're kind of the golden, somebody's gonna mention this in this video for sure, where they're like, your proximity to whiteness like makes you a more valuable person because like you're the, what is it called, like I think how Asians have like you're the stand-up citizen, what the heck it's called, I don't know, you know what I mean. And it's sad because it's all from insecurity. It's not from anything real. Like it's just simply projection and insecurity.
I do identify with your story as well. I grew up also like hating that I was Asian, but like specifically Chinese. I would hear like kind of a negative connotation about Chinese, that like they're liars and they're ugly, and also being around predominantly white community and like in high school, like hanging out with a lot of group of girls that were often white and I was the token Asian, like just made me more and more hate my appearance and not think that I was attractive. I guess with being insecure with that, it's almost like, yeah, that internalized racism and like self-hatred that happens. So that's why I am on this side as well.
Internalized.
Oh, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
Like totally resonant with what both of you guys were saying. I was always proud to be Asian. I was proud of my differences, but I think it was always interesting reckoning with this idea of being proximal to whiteness. And what I mean by that is when white people growing up said, oh, like you're basically white, they were saying that to validate me as being like a first-class citizen because I'm like almost white because I was raised in a white family. And then when Asians would call me a banana, or when Asians would say, oh, well, you're not really Asian. that would hurt on a different level.
Yeah, I would get that too.
Because, of course, we are Asian. And yeah, it just feels incredibly invalidating.
I mean, for me, like, I'm on strongly disagree because I'm a proud Hispanic. Like, I'm Nicaraguan.
Yeah, it's just so incredibly confusing because you grow up thinking there's a way to be whatever you are. Like, there's a way to be your specific ethnicity because, like, that's a binary we're set with because we live in a society where race is defined by racism. You know what I mean? Like, we're not a progressive society to where we can say, that's Ruth, she's just a person. No, that's Ruth, she's a black person, and this is what that means, like, in society. So she either goes against it or she's completely it. You know what I mean? So I feel like I'm, as an adult, completely have come to terms with the fact that being black looks so many different ways. Like, it's something that black Republicans say that I don't believe. No, that I believe, that I don't want people to think that I'm like a black Republican and believe like other things related to like black Republicanism, but like, we're not a monolith. Yeah, like, I'm just saying that because I don't want people to think that I'm like Candace, Miss Owens. But truly, if black is a social construct, then what does that mean for me? You know what I mean? Like, I'm a product of my environment, and my environment happened to be, I grew up in African countries, not feeling entirely African, in an adopted family that was majority white, and then ended up kind of feeling like I didn't have to be black a certain way. So, like, I don't know.
I'm Nicaraguense and I'm Honduran, and I'm always gonna be proud of that no matter what. And I get how some people can be like, oh, my race, like, it falls in my bloodline that, like, there's alcoholism, drug addicts, but I'm never gonna let that define my anger or my percentage of how I am or how I represent myself, ever.
Yes. So I would say with my family, like cousins, grandparents, all of that, the conversation of my adoption didn't really start happening until like when Mike Brown was shot. That was kind of the first time that I really felt invalidated by my own family, because I think I was trying to get them to recognize like I'm a black woman and there are people right now who look like me that are going through very traumatic things, but my family didn't view it that way. I felt very invisible. Yeah, I didn't have anyone to relate to. All my family comes from a really small town in the Midwest, like 95% white, and to the point where like the KKK, it used to be a sundown town, like that kind of thing. And so, yeah, growing up, it just went from, I was just kind of there as Michaela, but not a black person. It was more of just like, they would always say to me is like, I don't see you as black. I just,
100%.
Yeah, you know.
All the other time. And I was happy. I was glad.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I'm not gonna like be a victim of racism. Like,
yeah,
yes.
At the time,
One of them.
Exactly, yeah. And
You know, my mom was explaining to me that the idea of colorblind, like people who will tell you, oh, I don't see color, came from an idea of what was like the 70s or 80s. My mom was telling me, I completely forgot. But it was like a product of this decade that was made to be like a good thing. Like, we don't see color in the way that like we don't see the stereotypes that we've placed you into. We don't see the negativity that racism is, like, we don't see that. We want to see you as a person. Unfortunately, it's not a good thing because it like really does negate like all of the things that a lot of people of color have gone through, in the way that like, no, I can say that blackness is a part of my identity in a good way, but also kind of like, not in a good way, in a real way, because I want people to know that blackness, like the way that I've experienced my blackness has been through some negative experiences, but unfortunately and kind of fortunately, some negative experiences do shape your like values as a black person or as like a person of color.
Nature is stronger than nurture. 3, 2, 1, go.
This is because it's like, okay,
Nature is stronger than nurture.
is
Your
it?
genetics
We don't
are
know.
stronger
We're
than how you were
adoptees.
raised.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
This is
We don't know
confusing.
anything.
You said it correctly. We just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just all the trauma, you know. Damn. I want to know, like,
I
why
wanna
do
know.
you agree, like, out of everybody here, you know?
So I was raised by conservative Christian parents, and I do not look like a conservative Christian whatsoever. Growing up in a very strict no alcohol, no drugs, no gambling, no tattoos, being gay is not okay, marriage is for a man and a woman, here I am, you know, in a same-sex relationship, covered in tattoos. Both of my biological parents suffered tremendously with their mental health. They were in and out of, you know, mental facilities. I mean, not to be cliche, but 2 out of every 3 Native Americans struggles with addiction, and I did struggle with homelessness and addiction, just like my parents did. I read the Bible cover to cover growing up, and I still made the choices and had the journey that I had.
I'm neutral for the fact that, like, at some point it was nature. Genetically, my dad drank a little bit. My mom, she suffered through mental health. And, you know, I remember being a kid seeing all of that. But I don't let that define me, because genetically, like I said, you can stop genetically the nature of what you're surrounding.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm the first person in my biological family to go to college. You know, thank you, just got accepted to a UC.
Yo,
Crazy.
congrats.
Thank you. It's never too late to get an education, but you know, like I'm on that path trying to make a better life for myself.
Yeah.
Being a criminologist, nature versus nurture
Speak on it.
is one of the biggest dilemmas. And after almost 10 years studying, I'm here because I see that environment affects people tremendously.
Tremendously.
Whether you're still with your biological parents, whether you're adopted, foster care, it doesn't matter. For example, crime or criminality can be developed by your environment. If you grew up in like white suburbia, white picket fence, a lot of money, or if you grew up or in a family where everybody is gang related, who has more chance of developing criminality, right? And it's not necessarily who your parents are or your bloodline. So that's why I'm
Who you
here.
surround yourself with.
Yeah. So I met my biological family when I was 18. I went to a family reunion. That was kind of like my first big thing where I like met everyone, like over 100 people. I went by myself. I definitely felt out of place. I was like, these are the people who are my blood and I look like them, but I also felt like a stranger still. And I think that just goes into the identity piece that made it even harder for me, because I was like, I finally met my birth family, but these people do not feel like family at all.
I want to say, okay, there are so many similarities me and my sister and my mom have. So many things, like even my music taste. I felt like growing up, like very much, I very much so related with the artist that my sister was listening to. My mom and I feel like almost sometimes even think the same. Sometimes we'll be on the phone and I'm like, we have the same exact thought pattern. Like, and then like some members in my family, like in my like distant relatives, I'm like, clearly there's some sort of disconnect here. Like, we're not meant to be in the same spaces. But my aunt is also adopted, and I find that her and I are very similar in our thought patterns because I feel like that is that adoption string. You know what I mean? So nature versus nurture is something that's very fascinating, because I find that I have a lot of similarities with my own adoptive family, and but at the same time I would like to know what are the things that I have in common with my biological family. I'll never know. We'll never figure that out, but I want to know.
But also my birth dad, there's things that I see in him, especially like when I'm angry, we act the same. Or like there's things from my birth moms that we just both like she grew up doing that I've noticed that I do as well.
My biological family, since we're transnational, my adoption is transnational, I think is interesting because my parents and I are probably very different people just because of the experiences that we've had. And I come from a white American now background, and like they are in Uganda, or they were, I don't know if they're dead, alive, anything. So I just think it's incredibly fascinating, nature versus nurture, especially when we're talking about transnational adoptees.
So I definitely think there are things that like I've seen from my family that I've noticed in me, but I also still feel like a stranger at the same time.
I feel like also like children, babies, like we mimic a lot.
Yeah.
So like even, I know this is about transracial adoptions, but if you look at just same race adoption, people would be like, you're adopted, but you look so much like your parents. Or
Yes.
They get that all the time. Well, it's because you have the same mannerisms. I have the same mannerisms as my mom. Like, but people won't really seek those out or look for that or notice it because my mom is white and I'm black.
I am very much like my dad and very logical, very emotional like my mother. I've not gotten the chance to meet my birth family yet. I also grew up very, very Christian, very, very conservatively, and I think that did impact me quite a bit. So I think that it's a push and pull for certain things that are nature and versus certain things that are nurture. So I don't think there's an answer for it, but in terms of transracial adoption, I do want to think about the point of why the question was asked in the first place, which I don't quite understand where the question's coming from.
Blood versus not blood.
Blood versus water.
There you go.
Well, my tangent is a really long tangent, so
Go for it. I'm lost.
Okay. So I totally agree that we have like different brain chemistries. Like I'm predisposed to maybe being a little bit more confident or maybe more happy or whatever it may be. There's neurodiversity. That being said, I don't like this question, and maybe this is what you're getting at. I don't like this question because I think it takes away the responsibility of community, of environment, of society, and of government. And what I mean by that is when we were born in some place and we had no choice to be born, and then when we were displaced and brought up in a completely new environment, there is responsibility for the people closest to us and for the community and the neighborhood to be supporting and championing that person and seeing them not as the ones that are lucky or are grateful, but seeing them as the people that are strong and are resilient and people that we should champion in the society. And that's the responsibility of the people that made a choice that we didn't make as adoptees. Yeah, so I contest this question by saying, who cares about nature versus nurture? Nurture is pretty darn important.
I don't really know how to feel about that one. I feel like he was coming in with a lot of passion. I think also because he has two dads, you know what I mean? So the idea of nature is like, what the hell is nature anyways? Like, what the hell? But I will say that I do really, in a way, I do kind of appreciate the passion because my family is like the best family I could have ever ended up with. Like my family, I think, although I have had some quips and some problems and issues, what are synonyms if they're not problems and issues? What the heck? Ultimately, I do feel like I ended up where I was meant to be, and I feel like their nurturing really accentuated the person who I am and like am meant to be, and I was meant to be in that family. So like naturally, should I have even been with my birth parents? Didn't end up that way. So what the heck is nature anyways? You know what I mean? I think that a lot of adoptees have that kind of chip as well, as like nature did me dirty, but also didn't because now I'm nurtured.
I think it's more important than nature. I feel like you have to understand the nature in order to correctly nurture. Because if you don't nurture based on nature, you might not like educate them correctly.
Yes, yeah, really well said.
I'm very happy to be celebrating everyone's differences today, hearing each of your stories and the impact.
Okay, I'm done. That was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that conversation because I find that a conversation sometimes amongst adoptees come from, I feel like typically people who are like more real, and then the people who are like, that doesn't matter, like I ended up how I ended up, I'm not a victim, I'm not blah blah blah, I love my saviors. And I just feel like these were all a panel of very real people, and I so appreciated that. And these prompts, some of them I don't feel like were worded that well, but like, how could you know? You know what I mean? I feel like but also at the same time, this setup was phenomenal. In a way, I almost felt like there was a producer who was adopted, because it's like, even including that one segment of like, what's the most wild thing somebody said to you as an adoptee? Non-adoptees, I don't feel like would say that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Check out my channel. I record casual content of anything that pops into my mind. I've been recording like for these past couple days, like uploading pretty consistently. So if you want to stop by, eat a slice of the pie, let me know. Yeah.